The Board of Adjustments meeting to order. And if you will look at the October, let's let the board members introduce themselves except for Emil.
Ryan Baker.
Donna Cook.
Kathy Slagle.
Frank Lamia.
And soon to be Anil Vera. If you look at the October 17 minutes, and we will open for a
Make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
all those in favor?
Aye.
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 That went fast.
Now we're in the middle of a meeting.
Well, I can just introduce the agenda item and we can pause.
Is that okay with applicant? Can we do that? Just,
Or would you rather wait?
no, you can introduce and then we can get started with the presentation.
Okay. This is BOA 22.14, public hearing to consider the request of the applicant, Don DeGutz, for a 2.8 foot variance to the front setback requirement for properties owned R2 medium-density, single-family residential district. Property is approximately 0.2 acres, located at 110 Blakeney Avenue.
I think we should probably, we're kind of live on a meeting, so I think we should probably go ahead
I think so. Wait.
and,
Yep.
we have to do, Chairman Vera and Casey, if you want to go ahead and.
Here he is. I see a car pulling up.
Say 0, 1, 2, 4.
It is.
That's okay. We can get started and help.
It's the summary.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So to summarize, the applicant is requesting a building setback line variance to the lot at 110 Blakeney Avenue. The property is located or is zoned R2 and requires a 35-foot front setback, 35-foot rear setback, 10-foot side setbacks, and 20-foot side street setbacks. It's worth noting that the existing home is non-conforming per the R2 dimensional standards, and the only way it could be could continue to exist is to be maintained in its existing state at the 30-foot front setback. However, the applicant is intending to demolish the existing non-conforming building, which creates a self-inflicted hardship, and variances cannot be granted to relieve self-inflicted hardships. So, the applicant provided a survey showing the adjacent property owner's front setbacks. As shown, they were 30.1 feet and 35.5 feet. An administrative variance can be granted based off of the average of those two numbers. So the resulting front setback was allowed to be 32.8 feet. As such, the applicant today is requesting a 2'8" front street setback variance in order to have a 30-foot front setback as a result. There are 3 variance criteria that we consider when writing reports. So in regards to size, the lot is approximately 62 feet, which does not meet the dimensional standards in the zoning ordinance for R2 zoning districts. But given that there are a significant amount of R2 lots that are substandard within the fruit and nut district especially, we didn't feel that it was an extraordinary or exceptional condition that would pertain to this specific piece of property. It was also worth noting that front setback relief was administratively provided through the administrative variance process. The shape of the lot is rectangular. We have seen cases where they were pie-shaped in nature, which can create some size and shape constraints. But in this case, it was rectangular, so we didn't feel that there were any inherent challenges due to the shape. And in terms of topography, there was a total of approximately 5 feet of change over the subject property, which staff didn't feel created an extraordinary or exceptional condition for the piece of property. So this slide, you can see the existing survey with the residence and accessory structures on site. The site plan to the right shows the proposed site plan for the building that they are planning to build. There are 3 setbacks shown. We've indicated a purple shown at 30 feet, a red at approximately 32.8 feet, and a green at 35 feet, just for clarification visually. We have provided the elevations for you guys in your packets, and they're also on these slides if we'd like to discuss at any point. But again, staff recommends denial of the 2.8-foot front setback variance request. And we'd be happy to answer any questions you may have. The applicant is present as well.
Can you go back to the one that you had the set, yeah, that one? So the deck area that goes out beyond that towards the front yard, that's just an uncovered deck, is that what that is? Okay.
Correct.
So that the setbacks don't apply to that, correct?
Correct.
The 2.2 feet, that's as much as you can do administratively, right?
That is correct.
That's correct. The zoning ordinance was amended. There was always an argument for, and there was also some legal issues with the zoning ordinance used to read when within 200 foot in a block and had certain requirements. If you measured all of those and they were under the average of the front setback, then you could take the 2 adjacent properties, measure the average distance, and split the difference. We removed that 200 feet. Surveyors going on other people's property was getting to be, a little challenging, but, and just said you can take the average of the 2 adjacent properties and split the difference, but in no case shall go more than 5 feet over what the base front elevation was, whether that was R1, R2. That was a change in 2020, so. The end result didn't change, but other than putting a cap on things, but the process to get there made it a little easier for applicants to accommodate.
So what is the setback right now of the house?
Right now, it's that middle line. Well,
Okay.
I'm sorry. It's the building is built to the 30-foot line. Okay. The setback, if demolished, we're reviewing this as though the building is demolished, is 35 feet. We have already granted the administrative variance to split the difference between the 2 neighboring properties, and that's illustrated with the red line. It's 32.8 feet. So the difference between the 32.8 and what the applicant's request is, a 30-foot setback, is what the ask is today.
If they kept the present front line, they could build to what it is now.
Yes.
But they have chosen to not use that front footage.
If the building was preserved,
Yes.
you can maintain that. You can't extend that horizontally or vertically. But we have seen situations where people do utilize that front setback, step back into the regular setback, 35 feet, and then go up a second floor. We've seen a few of those projects.
So when you preserve the front line, do the other lines have to be preserved too, or can just the front line be preserved and used?
I don't know if there's anything in violation on this one. So non-conforming buildings are referred to as those that are in existence, and you can repair those. The little gray area is always the pitch of the roof and tying back into the new structure, and we've had some leniency there. It's kind of hard to tie in maybe a 1-story building to a 2-story building with not having a roof connecting that, but at times. But other than that, it's you couldn't move to the 30-foot line and add a second floor, if that
Yes.
makes sense.
Got it.
And whatever is in front of what is now the 32-foot, you can, within that footprint, keep it and a repair, but then as you move back in 35, you could. So the trick's always how you tie those 2 things together architecturally.
So you have to step it back. If you were gonna do a two-story, you'd have to step the second story back to the.
Exactly. Exactly. And we did, IT did receive the presentation. I believe the applicant has a presentation to give as well.
This time we'll ask the applicant to speak. And if you'll state your name for us for the record, please.
So, good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Donald DeGutz. I'm here with my wife, Colleen. We reside at 110 Blakeney Avenue in Fairhope. It's on the Bluff neighborhood. It's about 3.5 blocks that way. It's very close by. Yeah, I know it's after. Yeah, okay. Oh, and hello, Hunter, Michelle, Casey, Allie. I've gotten to know them for the past couple of months preparing for this evening. So thank you very much. I did prepare a PowerPoint. I'm used to doing that. I retired in January after 40 years as an aircraft engineer, last 12 years for Airbus. So I'm kind of tied into PowerPoints quite a bit nowadays, or then. And since I've retired now, this is my first attempt since. So moved here in 2010, rented this property, 110 Blakeney Avenue, from the previous owners. A few years later, Colleen and I married. She moved in with me, and we were given the opportunity by those owners to buy the property from them. So instead of going through the hassle of moving, we bought the property. And having retired just in January, the time now is to build our dream house in what I consider a dream neighborhood, the Bluff. So here we go. So this is the existing conditions, standing across the street from our property in the middle.
To the right is the bluff.
Yes.
The entire area is the Bluff. To the
Well, I
right
mean,
is
to
the bay.
The bay is, your site, when you look from the front of the house, you're looking, well,
It
No,
is.
Yes.
I'll elaborate. I've got it
Right.
here, but thank you for asking. So this is our home in the middle here. It's the oldest home now residing on the block. To the left is to the east. This is the Kathy Brumback and Louis Patterson. To the west here is Dr. McLaughlin and his wife Carolyn. This is the existing property, a home on the left on the property, set at 30 feet. It's built in 1955. It was upgraded a bit for the plumbing and electrical in 1985, but it is still just a vinyl siding covered structure from the 50s. And then on the right is our proposed cottage, 2 stories, very much in the style of the Bluff neighborhood. And you'll notice here on the northwest corners are the upstairs and downstairs covered porches, and then a deck that'll extend forward of that. Each of the porches on the corner with screens on the west side and front will afford us a view of the Bluff Park and the bay. And that's the key to why we're here today. If we keep our same setback as we have today at 30 feet, we'll be able to preserve those views. And I'll show you why in a moment. This is the street, Blakeney Avenue. It was once called Blakeney Street, but it's an avenue, I think, because it is a bit wider than some of the other streets in the neighborhood. Directly across from our street here, the subject property in pink, directly across is the newest home built. This is Rebecca Bryant and her husband Clay. You know, Rebecca's on the Planning Commission. They took advantage of their southwest corner, and they now also have a view of the bay from the first floor and a second floor covered porch. To the east of them is Vance McCown. He built his home in 2015, and he also has the advantage of a corner view to the bay. To our east, the Patterson and Kathy Brumbach, they built their house here. They have a large parking pad in front, a nice landscaped lawn. And to their east, you have a side view of the front setback of Leslie Evans and her husband, Danny. They built recently, 2019. 2006, Carolyn and Tony McLaughlin built this house. They moved from Daphne. They built this house, again, with an upstairs, downstairs, open porches with a view to the bay. Our house here in the middle, our proposed house, would also have an opportunity to look to the bay. It's just not the proper orientation here, but it will do that. Okay. Site plan today, existing conditions. This is taken from the GIS on the Baldwin County map, is our lot. As noted by Casey, it is substandard, non-conforming, it's only 62 feet wide, not the 75 foot of the current standard. And again, you've seen this. This is shaded. This is the current setback of 29.8, or virtually 30 feet right there, which apparently was a standard at some time for these homes in the neighborhood. You've seen this survey of the adjacent properties. I want you to note that the right-of-way varies, so that's the distance between our property line and the property line across the street, across Blakeney. That comes into play in a moment. And yes, the McLaughlins are at 30 feet. We are today at 30 feet, hoping to keep that so we can retain our view, as Tony has here. And the Pattersons on the east of us, they're at 35. They chose not to. This is a photograph of Tony's site plan back in 2006. It does show the 30-foot setback, and in line with we're the adjacent dwelling here to the east. This is our existing view from our rather rotting wooden deck we hope to replace soon, and what we hope to keep for future condition, at least as best I could photograph. You'll notice here, if I highlight, this is the front of Tony's house at the 30-foot setback. And from our covered porch or future covered porch, we would have this view of the Bluff Park and the bay. This tree is history. This is what we get if you deny our request this evening. We'll be set back about 2.8 feet from, 2.8 feet from that view, and we'll lose the benefit that our neighbors currently have. All we want to do is line up with Tony the way he did in 2006 to line up with us, as he told us. Okay. So there's a site plan with a proposed condition. You saw that as well. I've marked in the 30 feet that we hope to get. Proposed condition from the elevation shows views to the bay from Colleen's porch and from our porch down below. This will be her den behind this screen porch. This will be our breakfast area behind this first floor screen porch. Again, keeping with the cottage style, and some party board horizontal here. We've shown this to the neighbors at one of the recent sunsets on the bay that we have in the neighborhood. We gather for the sunset, and I showed this around. They were very, very excited for us. Oops. There we go. Jim, what did I do? Oh. Oh, yeah, right, gotcha. Okay, thank you. So, yeah, this is the current ordinance, 1253, and this is the current dimension standards for R2 property, with a lot area of 10,500 and a front setback of 35 feet. And this fits very well, I suppose, east of Greeno Road with all the True Land and D.R. Horton homes. But here we are on the bluff, and we have some limitations on the bluff and some real good reasons to vary from this 35 feet. Again, that's why I'm here. The original Fairhope single tax colony on the bluff, I have a plat from 1911, consists mostly of these non-conforming lots. So here's the subject property again. Get this right. And you'll notice that these are all non-conforming widths all along here. This is Summit Street. Right? Just as a point of reference, this property here is under construction. They bought a home knocked it down, and they're building a new house right here. They have a straight view of the bay. This is also the newest house across the street. Vance built his new house. Leslie built their new house. I'm the oldest. Tony's next. And then this is also a house. Dr. Clay is retiring, and he's moving back to a house he grew up in. And he's going to, you had a review here last year, and he's going to take off half the house and build a new section and retain the front. That's important here in a minute as well. So just want to illustrate the bluff, the Founder's Bluff, 1911, this plat. Hasn't changed much, maybe a few subdivisions, a few rotations, but these lots are all non-conforming at 66, and the homes on them suitably positioned. Just a subtle thing here, if you look here at Blakeney, you notice that the right-of-way is 66 feet wide at this end, and at the western end, it's 80 feet. Today, it's 66 still at the eastern end and 91.5 feet. It's a fantail shape. It affords every one of these homes on these properties a view of the bay, if you position them in line. So again, that's why we want to line up with Tony to the west, so we can keep the view that this shape, this unique shape, affords us. These lots are more like trapezoidal, not a perfect rectangle because of the alignment of the right-of-way. And again, there's a 25-foot width difference between the east and west, affording us the view of the bay. The ordinance for non-conforming lots, we've already determined I'm subject to, does in fact state that in cases the front building line may be the same as the average front building lines of the adjacent lots. So the administrative variance that we received allowed that. I want you to emphasize the word may. So it's not an absolute. The absolute here is the last sentence. In no case shall the front building line be more than 5 feet less than the minimum setback required for the district. In that case, you've got 30 feet. So with your consideration and with this in mind, you're not violating any rules by allowing us the 30-foot setback. It's here in the ordinance as a limit. Here again is the administrative variance, which is really a letter approving the variance, or I'm sorry, approving the setback that's written into this ordinance. So it's a given that the average is allowable, but we're seeking the cap. Just an illustration here, the yellows, these are the yellow lines are my, and the magenta are my input to this overhead view from the Baldwin County site. The red lines define the property lines. Again, the 66-foot width of the right-of-way here, 91.5 at this end. I drew the yellow lines as best I could, probably not as good as Casey has done, to show where the front building lines are. So here, Rebecca's house is at 30 feet. Vance having a side setback of 20 feet. Leslie and Danny, they've got a front setback of 35, but they positioned their house along Summit, along the long line at 20. Here we are at 30. I'm sorry, this is Louis and Kathy at 35. They chose 35. We're at 30, Tony's at 30. Again, we hope to keep the view from these new corner porches the way others have done. You know this, you should know this by heart, right? We're seeking a variance at this time to get the remaining 2.8 feet that we need. The staff report that was provided earlier, or early last week, I've taken the excerpts and I've responded to that. So this is my put as a response to the staff report. It stated that the applicant has stated that the intent behind the variance is to preserve the bay view that the existing home has. Staff does not support view preservation as a justification for a variance. So I'm hoping you do. Responding to Casey's remarks earlier, my point here, the subject lot is uniquely shaped by the widening right-of-way This creates a trapezoidal shape favoring views to the bluff, park, and bay. In addition, the topography rising to the east also affords a viewpoint down to the bay. Combined, these exceptional conditions promote the public health of the residents and general welfare of neighbors and visitors to the bluff. And I'll explain that later as well. So the bluff is unique. I think you know that from living here. I think you know that if you knew the property values and the prices that they sell for. So it is a desirable, probably the most desirable area in town. Here again from the Baldwin County GIS map, just to emphasize the slopes, the sloping up. When I bought homeowners insurance after buying the house, and they asked me, how close am I to the bay? And I said, are you less than 1,000 feet? I said, yes, but I'm 72 feet above the sea level. And I think you know that flood insurance can pretty much
good.
make or break a budget. But I had to point out to them, I may have a view of the bay, but I'm not at sea level. I'm 72 feet up. So there's no flood issues with that. But I've had to point that out. Again, the founder's view of Blakeney and even Powell, a bit of a fantail to afford the views. Here it's enhanced again. I won't repeat it, but I've made this point. If you haven't visited the site, I'll assume you have, but if you haven't, for the moment, this is the view looking west to the Bluff Park, past the stop sign and the bay. This would be our driveway here on the left, and then looking uphill east from Bayview Street. You'll notice this porta potty here because Dr. Clay has begun demolition and building his extension here in the corner. Our house is here, just past Tony's house. Okay, again, responding to the staff report, this is about an unnecessary hardship. The unnecessary hardship imposed by the excessive setback, by the 32.8, is a loss of the view to the Bluff Park and the bay, and is contrary to the purpose and intent of the ordinance, which I'll show you in a moment. With regards to peculiar characteristics, the subject property is currently aligned with the newer structure at 108 Blakeney, that's Tony's house, adjacent and to the west. In fact, that front building line was chosen by the homeowner with the purpose of aligning with our property. That's what he told us, so that he would, in his new home there, would keep the view and wouldn't block us. The alignment permits a view of the bay for both properties today. Also, that the adjacent property to the east, the Pattersons, they did not avail themselves of the 5-foot allowance that would have been available to them at the time. They had no intention. They don't have bay windows. They have a fence, an 8-foot fence. So they're not interested in the view. I know, Ms. Slagle, you probably would ask that because you seem to have an interest in the bay view, I've heard. And lastly, relief, if granted, would not cause substantial detriment to the public good and impair the purpose and intent. And again, in the staff report, it was said there would be no substantial detriment to the public good or impairment of the intent by denying the 2.8 setback request. Well, that's not the point of this statement. It's tried to show that if relief is granted, does it create a problem? And I'm here to convince you it does not. In fact, the answer to D should be there would be no substantial detriment nor impair the purpose and intent of the ordinance if relief is granted. And again, within that ordinance, the cap would be 30 feet. Again, purpose and intent of Article 7 for nonconformities. The ordinance seeks to protect the public health, safety, and general welfare, avoid any unreasonable invasion of property rights. It also points out that lawful nonconformities can adversely affect taxable values. I'm going to show you that our taxable value is actually increased, which increases our taxes to the city because we have the view. And the conditions should seek to ultimately secure compliance with a comprehensive plan. So I have a citing from that as well. About the public health. So a bay view, we should all know intuitively, but if you Google it, a bay view will ease you into a blue mind. It's less stimulation. It's calming. It's good for your health. Stating the obvious, right? And that's what I hope to get out of this in my retirement years. we had an appraisal done in order to get the loan. We had to determine loan to value. So the appraisal of the planned home on that site recognized the benefit of the location, the Bluff neighborhood, recognized the benefit of a bay view, and compared to another house on in the Bluff without a bay view, they've credited us or awarded us, I guess credited us $100,000 for that view. That's an increased taxable value, which serves the purpose and intent of this ordinance, right? To take that away, you would have an adverse effect, and I'd pay less taxes. I'm not declaring a hardship. I'm happy to pay the taxes. Comprehensive plans referenced in the purpose and intent, including the goal and objective to preserve, protect, and enhance Fairhope's connection to Mobile Bay. Now, I don't fish, I don't swim in the bay much. I do go out and on the pier, but I want to sit on my new covered porches and enjoy my connection to the bay in my retiring years, and that's a view that I need. Again, the comprehensive plan cites Fairhope's greatest assets, its physical environment, the bay, its topography, and one that draws visitors and potential residents. We all know that, right? And lastly, the goals and tasks of the comprehensive plan, and a short-term priority for the planning department, is to propose and create a process for the owners and neighbors of redeveloped lots in Fairhope where existing homes are removed and new homes constructed, so that the new construction is sensitive to the context of surrounding as-built conditions. Again, affording us the view tomorrow that we have today. And this is how I would have presented the answers to each of the criteria, right? Obviously favoring the granting of the variance. Again, speaking of the right-of-way, and as it affords each lot the potential for a view. On the hardship that, due to the above conditions, setting the building line along this arbitrary mathematical average between existing structures does away with the view afforded by the topography. And I'm asking you to consider that and say this averaging is not beneficial in this case. It might settle arguments, and I know, Hunter, when you presented it to the Planning Commission, that it was a means to eliminate the laboriousness of making the determination, but in this case, it would eliminate our view. Letter C, a peculiar piece of property against, again, the front building line of Tony's home at 108 Blakeney to our west was lined up with us, and we'd like to remain aligned with him. And lastly, there is no detriment to the public good if granted this variance. In fact, as I showed the picture, the elevations to neighbors at one of the recent Sunsets on the Bluff gatherings, they were very, very supportive. I don't see them here to object, and I know, Ally, you didn't receive any objections, right? Yeah. Okay. I will tell you, though, there's a woman named Lila who I didn't know. She came by after receiving the letter that you send out, 91 years old, introduced herself in her running shoes. She said she wanted to look at the property and understand what's going on. So we showed her what we're doing. We showed her the trees in the back. We showed her the front, the same explanation I've given you, and she was very supportive. In fact, she lived in that home for almost her whole 91 years on Summit. So she was nice enough to walk over, about a block and a half. I have just a few left, and I'll let you go. I do know that there is a history here in the Board of Adjustments where you've considered views in the past. Here's one from Dr. Clay on the corner, who wanted to put a pool in the side setback, and that was rejected. He also wanted to put an 8-foot wall around it for privacy. So he's proceeding now without the pool. Unfortunately, I would have liked to have had a neighbor nearby with a pool, but he will be building the 8-foot wall. The concern about the 8-foot wall was that it was going to block Tony's view and my view. However, it is so deep to begin with. Again, the sloping topography of the bluff, it won't be a problem. But it was noted by the staff. I think her name was Samara Wally, right? Okay. This is what she said, quote, "Staff finds that it could be possible to place the pool within the required setback behind the house. Staff also notes that the intent of the street side setback on corner lots is to, I emphasize here, to preserve the street view for the properties along Blakeney Avenue. And that's us. So it has been considered before. Hunter spoke to it as well when Tony McLaughlin was here that evening, and he wanted to know more about the wall and the blocking of the view. Hunter made a comment and pointed out that maybe there's a compromise available. So I know that there was some interest and concern on the part of the city zoning to consider a view. And coming to the end here, in September you met here, and there was a variance request by Ed and Dana Hamel on Pamley on Kiefer. And they were requesting a 2-foot variance to the front setback requirement to give them 33. So instead of 35, they wanted to stay where they are today at 33 and build a new house. And the 33-foot setback was where they have a pergola and a wisteria covering it. The home and its pergola will not be any closer to Kiefer than the existing structure. And Anil and Kathy, you commented, you were concerned about what the neighbors might think. And Anil, you said, I think most people are okay with it not expanding past what they currently have. And Kathy says, I think so. They don't want their line of sight to the bay interfered with. And then Frank, you made the motion to approve. So I'm just pointing out that there have been discussions about view from both the city staff and from this board, and I'm here requesting the same consideration, so I thank you for that. One last thing, I promise. You see the logo of City of Fairhope, and you see the view. That's pretty much what I'm looking to keep in this new project, so thank you very much.
Is there any questions for the applicant by any of the board
I have a
members?
question. On the west side of your property, you have a lot of very tall, beautiful azaleas. Are you planning to wipe out that whole border?
It's not something I have to do. It's something that my neighbor to the west, Tony, suggested I could do. We haven't maintained them lately, but that's a great question for my wife, Colleen.
Oh, there's trees in there too. I can't hear you, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this is my wife, Colleen.
Hi, Colleen. We don't know what the health is of all of those plants and trees. The trees are staying, and they're on the border of our property and 108 Blakeney, so I'm not sure, I don't know if you know, if
Tony
they're
said
actually
we can do
ours.
what we want with them.
But you don't have a view if you keep them.
Yes, we do. They're further to the front of the property. They're not
Okay.
at the
That's
house.
a very good point, but let me.
Yeah.
Right, they're not in this view. They're forward.
They're forward with that.
Sorry. Yeah, they start probably out here to the street. And if we do keep them, we would trim them down. They're quite overgrown right now.
So your neighbor to the east has a 2-story home, correct?
Yes.
Right.
So right now they can see over your house because it's a 1-story.
I don't know how, they have a chimney here. I think there are a couple of 2 small windows on the side. They have no bay windows at all.
They have a
So they're not
fence.
even trying to see the bay. And they built this 8-foot
Fence.
Fence, yeah.
out forward of their setback. So unless you press your cheek up to this window and stand on a tall ladder, you're not going to see the bay. They had no intention to do that. We asked them, I said, why did you build where you built? Said, no, they didn't know. They do have a deep parking pad, and they do have a very nice sculptured lawn, but they're not looking for the view.
You know, in support of that neighbor who built the fence, driving around all the different streets up there, I find it very common that people are not trying to get a view of the bay. They have quite a few of these fences and are not have not pushed to have a bay view. I mean, they don't see the park, they don't see the bay. Now, how long do you think you're going to have a view of the bay with all the trees in the park that are steadily growing every year? And I question how long you're going to actually see the bay.
Well, again, my point about the founders, they designed these streets to afford us a view of the bay for as long as is possible. It's a wide view at the end of Blakeney, not, even wider than Powell Street, as I show here. So I think that was the intention, and to answer your question, I can see the bay, and I can feel the breeze, and that's another factor. Getting that breeze into the house right now is a great advantage. It saves us money and it gives us fresh air. We have that because we're not back behind another house.
And also the park at the end of the street, where we are, the upper elevations of that does not have a lot of trees. It's lower,
Yeah,
when
they
you
have
get down to
weddings
the
there.
beach, they have weddings and things on that park.
Okay, my question was the park and the trees and the rapid growth down there.
Oh, below, the trees that are growing up from the beach.
There are trees below, but there's not trees up on the bluff level
Mm-hmm.
in the park that's up there.
Oh, I think
There's-
there are.
Yeah, there's very few trees in that area.
But that wouldn't account for our other neighbors who built in the past few years, as I showed you, that have built those corner porches. So they must know something that we don't know, if you think that, that view would be lost.
Only the house on the eastern side, the one that was built in 2008, that did not take advantage of being able to be at 30 feet. Even if our house didn't exist and their fence was gone, they still would not have a view. They built their house for privacy, I guess. Their porch is on the other side. Their porch is even more set into the house than even the front of the house. So even if our house wasn't there, sitting on their porch, they still would not have a view.
So this is a tear down and a completely new house.
Oh, yeah,
So-
we owe it to our neighbors to do so.
So that, self-inflicted or self-created hardships may
Right.
not be the basis for a variance. And then it goes on, if the applicant for the variance has done something to his or her property that has necessitated the variance request, then you can't, that's a self-inflicted or self-created hardship. So how do you, you're creating this hardship by wanting to build a new house, and you have to follow the current rules. When you tear it down, you're sort of got a blank slate when it comes to this stuff. So
The house itself was built in 1955 and had some very moderate modifications that were never made to improve. It was actually just made to sustain it. There's not any reason to keep anything. There's not a good foundation. The kitchen floor is cracking above that. So there's not anything to work with what we have in the current home.
Yeah, and I'd like to say the comprehensive, everybody, there are a lot, I don't know if you've been through the neighborhood, but
I
there's
have.
a lot of porta
I have.
potties, a lot of dumpsters,
I've been there.
right? So they're building, and they're knocking down and building, and you might drive by and see a house and say, that ought to come down. So we're one of those. And this is why I show you this picture, because the rest of the neighborhood's already done it. And this is what we hope to do. We hope to, again, the comprehensive plan supports what we want to do. The purpose and intent of the ordinance supports what we want to do. Even the ordinance as written allows a may and not a shall for that mathematical average. So we're not looking to exceed the cap that the ordinance allows or exceed the front building line of our neighbor to the west.
Well, the ordinance allows you what they were able to give you on the administrative variance.
Yeah, but that's still almost 3 feet behind
Right.
our next door neighbor. We lose the view.
If I may just add a couple of notes, because I think points of
Only if
clarification.
it's supporting our argument.
Yeah. But I do think telling us what to put in our staff report can be a little dangerous. I want to talk about what is detrimental. I think a lot of the points here are valid. I don't think it's in support of the end result, but, you know, when we look at what's detrimental, and as you know, we don't look at what's here today. We have to think in the future. We have to plan. So the neighbor to the east may not want to view today. But what happens when they come in, some new owner wants to add on, wants to do something, and then they can't get to 30 feet and have a view? Because it's the opposite of what the street, so they're coming in and asking for 25 feet so they can have a view.
Agree.
There's a lot of assumptions on why this street was designed this way. It's kind of like the garden lights we heard on Kiefer. I don't know that that is the case, and I don't disagree that that was originally how it was laid out. But through the history of our city, we create codes and ordinances to elaborate on that. Early on, the front setbacks were 40 feet. I don't know the answer of why this was built in the 50s. That could have been right before the zoning ordinance came into play. It could have been someone took advantage of a non-conforming existing structure at that time. But as we talk about, the non-conforming structures can be detrimental to the overall goals. And those are there, and that's why we have these rules in place to do that. I think you're very astute to note the self-inflicted language, but you know, there's another section I do want to read, and I know this comes down to the legal advice, which is, you know, I want to mention the money is not something, and there's Alabama case law, you know, because it might be cheaper or higher tax values or saving money on construction. Those are practical matters we all understand. But all of that legal advice was variance should be granted in extremely rare cases. So, and that cannot be a reason you can grant a variance. I mean, that's something we've had work sessions on, and that's what our legal team is talking to us about, that's trying to guide and coach the board. So that is why we have that request for denial. There's other means. You know, the applicant actually a couple of weeks ago said, hey, could we get a tree variance? That, under our regulations, is actually a possibility that would give the 30-foot setback. We don't have a tree on the survey. That would be Ron, you've done it before.
Yeah, I just didn't see a tree that I didn't know.
It's not on the survey. We said what we'd have to have there is an arborist report and then building plans that confirm that you will not be, you know, that's the procedure, and the applicant chose to come on with a variance request at this time. So,
Do I get to respond? I don't know how much farther you want to go, but there's many points to be made. I'd like an opportunity to respond.
I can let, you know.
Yeah. Here in this old survey here, there is a tree in the back. It's a 16-foot. It's marked as 16-foot size. We don't want to put the new house any closer to that. We had Donovan Ballard of Chris Francis come out. He took a look at these trees in the back on city right-of-way. He thinks they're due to be removed. We do need to remove them to put our carport. We have a permit to do that from the horticulturist in the city. We had Donovan look at this huge, beautiful oak tree in the back, and we don't want to get any closer to it. We don't want to push back any farther.
How does that relate?
do that.
Do you have your new plan where that tree is in relation to your new plan?
No, our designer is not of that, no, she didn't do that.
Okay.
Right. But I staked out on the back lawn where the corner of the house would be, and he was aware of that. The tree curves like this to the back. It doesn't curve forward or over the house. It curves towards the back. It'll be trimmed because there's a lot of dead limbs on it, but we don't want to move back any closer to that tree with our house. So far as the financial, I'm not declaring a financial hardship. I don't want to be misunderstood. But the view of the bay, as I said, does afford a higher value of the home, but a higher taxable value as well. And that's to the benefit of the city and the county. So where you see, and I'm sorry, I'm scrolling through, where you see in the purpose and intent of this ordinance, you should avoid adverse effects on taxable values, and we are doing that. We are in full compliance with this purpose and intent. I spoke of the health, spoke of the view, and spoke of these taxable values.
Can I ask you a couple of questions on your slides here? So can you go to your one that had all the different neighbors' pictures? So the one all the way to the east has that one right there, built in 2019, has that large, what I'll call patio.
Yeah,
area.
that's their front setback. They built the bulk of the house along Summit on their side
Right.
setback.
But that's not covered. The majority of that is
It's
uncovered.
covered.
The
up
majority
to-
of it's not covered though.
Well, I think it's about halfway. There's a cover here that extends, and you can see the post here. So I'm going to estimate that from the
I've been
wall
out
of the
there.
house to
I'm
that
very
post.
familiar with it. The majority of it's not. I mean,
Oh,
I'm-
you are? Oh,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm very
Okay.
familiar
Oh,
with
no,
it.
if you know, then you
Yeah,
know.
but what I'm getting at is, you're there, on your design, it shows, you're also showing a porch patio deck area that's uncovered.
Right.
That gives you a great view of the bay, that would afford you the same view opportunities that they have with their setback that they have. And they're abiding by the 35-foot setback, and they've accomplished this additional view corridor by doing that. And it looks like you're doing the same, you're creating the same benefit to your property that your next door neighbor did not do. Obviously, they could have, they put a parking court there instead.
Right.
So
They might not
why
get
is
as
that
beat
any
up by
different?
bugs
Can you
like that.
answer me, why is that any different for your view opportunity than the covered enclosed porch behind it? And how does that make any difference?
Well, I've never had a covered porch in growing up. And I look across the street, I drive around the neighborhood, and I want covered porch. We designed the house with all that in mind. We're not here asking for you to help us redesign, because we know, speaking with Donovan Ballard for the siding, we know with our designer, we have a really great design. We've shared it with our neighbors. They're very supportive. To answer your question, the neighbor to our west and across the street
one
have
of-
those porches.
The one across the street, that porch is a lot further back, at least 35.
Yeah, but
It's
she's-
not further
No,
than
it's
that.
not, it's 30.
No,
It's
her-
30.
It's
They
30.
It had a very weird lot, and
But
they
the-
were
the
afforded
porch
25
part is
feet.
further
but-
back than the front of the house.
Yes, the
Well-
porches.
well,
And
yeah.
it was
No, it
closer to the
starts at
30.
front of the house.
Yeah.
That house did have a variance.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because that lot was 50 feet wide. It's-
And
it's-
L-shaped.
yeah, it's
And
really
they could
weird.
have built to 30, but she
25.
considered a 25. But they didn't, at the front wall is to 30. So they didn't take advantage of what they could have done for the properties to the east. So,
Right.
and the steps, I think, are set back right.
Yeah.
And the porch cover is.
I guess I'm just asking, why do you think, you're asking about views. You're saying that you only, the reason
Yeah.
why you should be granted this is
Views and the breeze, yep, and the
You
airflow.
didn't put views, you said views.
Well, I
And you're,
I
I'm
can
just,
elaborate here that
I
we get a
understand,
view.
but
I mean,
I'm reading
breeze.
what, I'm
Okay.
responding to what y'all requested from,
Yes.
was the views. And I'm asking why you're gonna get worse views from this extended porch area that's not gonna be acceptable to you.
Bugs.
Bugs.
I mean, we want to sit in a covered screen porch.
I grew up in a house that had a covered screen porch. It had a view of nothing except the neighbors. But I spent most of my summers in that screen porch because I have a real problem with bug bites.
And why do you think you won't see the bay from the screen porch? 'Cause I think you will.
I won't, I don't think I will, as well as I'm set back.
2 feet.
No, 2.8 feet further back.
I'm
And
just,
I don't want to sit, put my chair at the very front corner of my porch. I want it to be nice and fit in with the neighborhood.
your camera angle here is really deceptive, I just will say. Your
Yeah,
other
it's hard.
camera angle turned straight up towards the street.
Yeah, this is
one
hard
you
to get
turned
the
and
phone
looked
in.
straight at the
I'm
wall.
trying to get the phone
so-
right at the wall of the
Yeah.
house.
But you won't be looking that direction. You'll be looking that direction. So,
Yeah,
I mean,
but we're
I
still
just-
going to have 3 feet of their wall extended in front of us.
In front of us.
But I see
that's
you
what-
want to challenge.
I understand, I
all these things.
understand
I
your
understand.
perspective from that perspective, though. That's why I'm asking the questions.
How long is your roof overhang up in the front of the house?
And No more than 2 feet, I know that's the limit. Our designer knows the rules on that. Yeah, no more than 2 feet.
So that, that extends.
It's just an eve.
And the line we're talking about is the main structure, not the overhang, right?
Right.
So it's already,
So, yes, the way we define the eaves is about the front yard, so you can
Right.
come out for eaves, architectural details, 2 feet.
You're allowed 2 feet if you have maybe a bay window or a fireplace, but the front building line is defined along the setback.
Right.
You're right.
We would not be here today if our neighbors to the west had not built to 30 and matched our front setback. If the street was going the other way and the houses were going the other way, then it would be fine. We would be fine with 35, we'd be fine with 32 point whatever. But the street and the houses have, over time, changed the direction of where you want to be and how far you want to be from the street itself, in order to keep what you already have.
With the triangular shape of the street, or trapezoidal shape of the street, your lot is actually closer. You know, if you think about it this way, your front property line is closer in, narrower in, than your neighbor that's just beside you. They're further back from it's widening it out like this. You're here, they're here. So that 2 feet you might actually be in a straight line on my street that are all perfectly straight. I don't know if that makes sense to y'all.
Well, the houses are aligned with the center line of the street, right?
They're
So they're
aligned-
almost stepped like this, which affords views past each other.
Yeah.
Right?
If people choose to take advantage.
But what I guess what I'm
Yeah.
saying is, if you think about this for a second here, okay? Your neighbor's here, they're 30 feet off of here. If you're 30 feet here, you're gonna be in front of them, because the street narrows.
Well, we're there today.
And we're not.
And we're not. I
Well,
mean, you know what I
But
mean.
I mean, I'm just telling you, like,
Yeah.
math, it's the
No,
same.
yeah, you're right.
Yeah, so
Yeah, it's
the
geometry.
extra 2 feet may be
There might
be
be
in
an inch or
alignment.
two
I mean, that's
somewhere.
what I'm getting at, so.
But again, the
Think
ordinance-
about that for a second.
The
Well,
bay,
I have-
window can
Yeah.
afford that view.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
That is
again,
allowed as
yeah.
a 2
Right,
foot,
so we're
with
not
the right
looking-
architecture.
Well-
And that bay window is at the 30 foot, or is that bay window extend the 2 feet?
On the neighbors?
Yeah.
That's at the front
That's
line.
at the
I'll show
front
you
line.
Because
that.
I know you allow the 2 foot
No, it's right here.
extension of architectural. So there,
30 foot to the front.
so the wall is actually like 32 feet, the edge of it.
Yeah,
But we can't see through their bay window.
Yeah,
It's
that's
as
right.
good as a wall,
right.
and it's 2 feet. It goes up both stories.
Yeah, but I'm just, the front of your house, not probably align with the edge of theirs, the bay windows, like protruding in front of it is the part that.
The bay window is their front building line.
Yeah.
That's how they designed it and built it. So we're subject to, the conditions on both sides, you've addressed all that.
Yeah.
We're subject to the ordinance as it's written, with the permissive may and an absolute cap. We're only seeking the absolute cap, and with your discretion, because you are the board, if we only worked with the zoning department, we would only get the 3.2. We're here only because we need to reach that cap. So we ask you to consider that with everything that we've put out there.
And as last considerations, again, the neighbors at 108 built to our setback. I think that we should be able to keep our setback, being that someone built to our setback. The neighbors at 112 didn't care anything about the view. They built back, they built a house that even if our house didn't exist and the fence didn't exist, if they sat on their front porch, they still couldn't see the bay.
One other thing for me, because Hunter touched on this, about the ordinance and how it was revised in January 2021 and what the intent may have been, because it has evolved over the years. The ordinance preceding 1253, 557, and it was amended in 1997. It says the front setbacks, in such cases, the proposed building may be aligned with the building/S existing on either side thereof. That was before this arbitrary average came in. So the ordinance at one time allowed you to align yourself with a building on either side. I know you want to get into
It's easy to, I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, there's an evolution.
Yeah,
of
it's an
zoning
evolution,
ordinances.
right, but this is the Bluff, 1911. It's not Greeno Road, it's not True Land, it's none of the homes out there where you've got all the room and no trees. We have the opportunity here to preserve our view today in the Bluff, taking advantage of the topography, the way the right-of-way is laid out, and our neighbor's house. We want to take advantage of these things. That's what we're asking.
I would like to make another point, that 2 months ago in September, this board heard for a variance request for Kiefer, where there was a side and a front setback request. Diagrams shown at that meeting illustrate a clear need for a side setback. It shows room in the back for a setback, making the front setback not necessary to build their proposed structure. In answering a question regarding the 2-foot front setback request, Hunter Simmons replied, it was to accommodate the front facade, and it would not be changing where it is. Well, we want to keep our front setback as it is to preserve and accommodate our view. That's it. There shouldn't be a discretion on one side and not the same given to the other. In the planning's printed general comments for that case, they stated that the home would not be any closer to the street than it is today. Planning recommended approval with conditions that applied only to the side setback.
I don't want to speak for Hunter or the staff on this, but every case is different. We look at topography, shape of lots, all, that was a completely different case
Yes.
than yours, so.
Right.
Very difficult lot.
Yeah.
that-
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to, the reasons why certain things were approved on that one, they have nothing to do with yours.
But I fully support that.
Yeah.
I mean, and that same logic that applied on Kiefer went into the recommendation on this one. We don't just consider what one person's view is, what one person's street appeal, if you will, why front yards are there in the first place. So,
Decision by our board does not set a precedent for future cases, correct?
it does. I think our precedent that can be set is if we don't find a true hardship, a view as being a hardship. I mean, you think if everyone comes in to ask for a variance, says, well, there's an oak tree over there and that's my view. You know, oak trees are very important to Fairhope, but, that's the reason we want a variance. That sets a really bad precedent, I'm afraid. There is language in our ordinances when you have a bayfront, and we even define what the front is on that. We do consider those things. But I think we set a really troublesome precedent, and that is why that legal advice, so first thing we have to find, is there a hardship? Our zoning ordinance has identified this as a non-conforming lot. Fruit and Nut is full of those. And we have guidelines for what is allowed there. And those are established by those non-conforming lots, and the average of 2 lots, so what reason is there to give more? And that's what we're evaluating tonight, and I think how we evaluate this does set a precedent and is a view enough to do that.
Is there any other discussion? I'd like to, thank you. I'd like to open the meeting to the public portion. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak for or against the project? Okay, I'll close the public portion. And board members, I'm looking for a motion.
I make a motion to deny.
Second.
Okay. All in favor will take a roll call vote.
Did I say aye?
Or the motion is to deny.
Yes, the motion is to deny,
Yes.
so I
Can-
say aye. Okay.
Can we state why we're denying the motion, the reasoning, just for the minutes?
Do we need to make a statement for a reason for denial?
I mean, we usually
You can say
ask.
staff
There's
recommendation.
the first staff recommendation.
May I make a comment to that, just because I'm subject to it?
No, we're voting.
No.
We're in the middle of the vote.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, so,
First staff recommendation.
okay, so we have a motion to deny based on staff
Different
recommendation.
setback variance request.
Yep.
Right.
Correct, yes.
So I say aye.
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 Motion is denied unanimously. Okay, our next order of business, is there a Board of Adjustment that we will have for next month?
We do
Yes.
have one case that we did receive.
Okay,
And then also for old new business, we do need to approve the agenda for next year as well.
Oh, yes, we do. Yep.
so has everyone looked at the dates of the new, for 2023 and 24?
It's in the back of your packet.
Yeah, I get to them, yeah.
Yeah.
So do I hear a motion to accept the dates?
I move that we accept the dates.
Okay, I have a second?
Second?
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 We'll see everyone next month. Thank you.
Thank you.
10 days to go to circuit court. I'd like to have the minutes